Great to see. Well, we've reported for months now about how certain parts of Western New York have been left behind when it comes to broadband internet access. And this week, we got a chance to ask specifically about the problem here in a conversation with the chairman of the FCC. Our Nate Benson has all the details on that in this Two on Your Side original.
So for those Americans who have not been able to benefit from it, we want to make sure going forward that to the maximum extent possible, they're able to get access to do these same things that we use it for. And whether it's doing your schoolwork or streaming The Last Dance or Tiger King, all of these things are only possible because of broadband.
That was FCC Chairman Ajit Pai in a webinar Thursday. He was talking about access to broadband during the pandemic and emphasized the need to ensure everybody is connected. But how do we do that? One popular idea is making broadband a utility. Now, this is a complex issue, and I could go in the weeds in this all day, but in its simplest terms, the issue is this. Since day one, the free market has dictated where and when areas will get broadband service. And how has that worked? Well, there are still pockets of the United States that don't have access. Even in our own backyard, there are huge gaps when it comes to broadband access. And for decades, it's been debated whether broadband should be considered a utility like your gas company. Well, broadband technology is constantly changing, whereas the gas line running to your house was probably installed 80 years ago and still delivers that same consistent service.
In the chairman's statement today, he talked about how important and how critical this is. And then he went on to say, well, we got to, it needs to make financial sense. He didn't say it needs to make financial sense, but that was the implication. He never said the magic words of public-private partnership.
The utility or private partnership model does exist in several hundred communities throughout the United States. Chattanooga, Tennessee is a popular example. The community there voted to install a community-owned broadband network, and they have access to over 100 megabits per second for roughly $30 a month. That has forced larger providers in that city to offer better service at cheaper prices. So why isn't this happening everywhere? Well, it's a fundamental argument about free markets and big government. Joel Thayer and Martha Beyer are two telecommunication regulation experts I spoke to. They provided their thoughts on broadband as a utility and public-private partnerships. Thayer says a utility system wouldn't be the same as a gas or electric company. And he says the easiest way for better service to get deployed in communities is for local and state governments to get out of the way.
Or clients. From my perspective, the biggest barrier to deployment has to be what you're seeing at the state and local level. So what we're actually seeing in terms of deployment is some of the adverse reactions to a lot of these FCC procedures or a lot of these FCC orders at the state and local level, particularly on the permitting side of things.
Which is true. We reported back in October about some of the inconsistencies the City of Buffalo Department of Public Works was having with regards to permitting fees. Some companies would be charged differently than others, and that inconsistent permitting forced companies to avoid coming to Buffalo. But attorney Martha Beyer is a proponent of the public-private partnership for broadband, similar to the electrification of rural communities in the 20th century. Private business won't do it alone, she says.
But a public-private partnership is the way to go. Nobody is going to pay to build towers to serve a few people when they can make much more money serving communities that are affluent and where there's a major demand. So we need to do something about creating and sustaining demand, and we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And private alone isn't going to do it.
But we've highlighted problems with that type of system as well. When New York State implemented its broadband program with private partnership, there have been consistent problems, broken promises, and delayed projects. So why is it worth having this conversation? Well, during the pandemic, it was obvious that there are still huge broadband access issues across Western New York. And if we're having conversations about reimagining education or working from home, then having access to broadband needs to be a part of those conversations. So how can you help? Well, keep messaging me your stories about broadband access across the region, and make sure you reach out to your lawmakers and demand access and high-quality services. Reporting in Buffalo, Nate Benson, Channel 2 News.